As her ship burned, Princess Solyra followed a scarred human soldier into the dark. The galaxy mocked him. She trusted him. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The throne room of the Citadel core, a spiraling column of obsidian and living metal suspended in Varelian Prime's upper atmosphere, had never known silence like this. Not when emperors died, not when wars were declared, but when Princess Solyra of House Nerea, sole heir to an empire that ruled 6 galaxies, extended her slender hand and pointed to the Terran in the corner. The stillness fell like gravity had thickened. He stood apart, not because he sought attention, but because he had no interest in earning any. Travis Cole, Earthborn, decorated in silence, built from scars that never made it into the Varelian archives. He was average in height by Terran standards, forgettable by alien ones. The faint silver of a facial scar bisected his brow and traced down past his left eye like a history half-buried. His armor was matte gray, a patched and scorched veteran's second skin. No honor crests, no clan tags, just a serial number worn off by sweat and smoke. Solyra's voice, when she spoke, was clear and soft, a contradiction to the sharpness of her decision. Him. Gasps turned to murmurs, murmurs into disdainful laughter. The Grand Marshal of the Orion Phalanx barked a scoff. One of the bio-lords chuckled through 3 mouths. The courtiers, in their floating silks and implanted gills, exchanged looks like they'd witnessed a malfunction in royal programming. Lord Varnus did not laugh. His glare sliced through the uproar with military precision. A legend of 12 campaigns, clad in neutron-forged battleplate, his very presence bent the room. His jaw clenched. His cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the Terran like a targeting reticle. He leaned toward the emissary beside him and growled, "She insults our legacy by trusting an Earthborn mongrel. She doesn't deserve the crown." But Travis didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He merely met the princess's gaze across the hall with a kind of stillness that unnerved even those trained to kill with thought commands. He wasn't impressed. He wasn't intimidated. And when the crowd laughed, he didn't react. That was what Solyra saw. That was what made her choose him. He was the only one who hadn't bowed. And in this empire, built on reverence, protocol, and inherited power, that made him the most dangerous man in the room. The second test came before the first had ever ended. In the cold void above the moon of Gentrax, the royal transport Valora's Mercy drifted listless, lights extinguished, systems gutted from within. Saboteurs had struck not with brute force, but surgical silence, cutting life support, corrupting navigation, sealing doors from the inside like surgeons closing wounds after infection. Panic swept the crew like fire in an oxygen-rich chamber. Protocols collapsed. Officers screamed into comms. The Royal Guard clashed with shadows, unsure who among them remained loyal. Travis said nothing. He sealed the bridge door with a fusion weld, yanked open a ventilation grate, and guided Princess Solyra into a crawl space barely wide enough for her shoulders. No ceremony, no apology for the grime or the crawl, just brutal necessity. They floated in dead silence, curled behind bulkheads and emergency relays, their breath the only sound in the black. He didn't comfort her. He didn't ask if she was all right. She already knew she was, because he hadn't panicked. When they were found by loyalists 2 hours later, Solyra emerged in silence. Blood streaked across her dress from a cut on her cheek she hadn't noticed. Travis stepped out behind her and reported the exact number of saboteurs he'd seen, their gear, and how they likely bypassed biometric locks. His voice never rose. "You don't panic," he explained later. "When you've watched your unit get wiped in Kandahar, you just act." On Eero 7, the halls of the Summer Citadel gleamed with goldstone, and the air hummed with perfumed heat. A servant with violet eyes and calloused fingers bowed too slowly. Travis saw the flick of the wrist a split second before the blade shimmered into view. The xenon venom hissed against the air. He didn't shout. He moved, precise, brutal, practiced. The servant was disarmed, bleeding and gasping within 3 seconds. Travis never drew a weapon. No royal armor, no energy shields, just hands that had once buried friends and pulled shrapnel from flesh without morphine. And still, the Empire mocked. The HoloNet spread rumors like disease. Earthling court's death. Varelian's shame in uniform. In a chamber lined with stars outside her quarters, Celira turned to him, her jaw tight, her voice low. They want you gone, executed as a threat to royal continuity. Travis didn't look up from calibrating his pulse rifle. I'm not here for their approval. I'm here because you saw something in me. If that changes, I leave. Simple. For the first time, she looked at him not as a protector, but as a choice. You're the first man in my life who didn't kneel, or lie. She walked away, but her silence had changed. It was the silence of someone who'd stopped looking for tradition to save her and started looking for truth. The fracture began not with an explosion, but with silence. Communications from the Varelian core abruptly ceased. One by one, systems went dark across the inner sectors. Then came the signal, a cold, calculated message from Lord Varnus, broadcast in perfect modulation by the neural cores of his Obsidian Legion. No threats, no appeals, just a new order and a single phrase. Stability will be enforced. Celira watched her birthright vanish in minutes. The Obsidian Legion was not merely a military force. It was an ideology given metal and blood. Soldiers stripped of identity, fused with predictive AIs that turned battlefield decisions into statistical inevitabilities. Their minds were no longer their own. They moved without hesitation, killed without pause, and they answered only to Varnus. By the time Celira realized the scope of the betrayal, it was nearly too late. Her royal convoy was disarmed mid-transit. Betrayers within her own house turned weapons inward. The royal flagship broke orbit under fire. Only one man acted with unhesitating clarity: Travis Cole. He dragged her from the bridge as plasma tore through the ceiling. A smuggler's vessel, rusted, unmarked, barely spaceworthy, hung in dock like an afterthought. Travis hijacked it with muscle memory and rage. They disappeared into a wormhole collapsing in on itself, the hull screaming as reality bent and threatened to crush them both. When they emerged, scarred and spinning above the unaligned planet Nera, the empire they knew was gone. What remained was her, shipless, crownless, a fugitive. And Travis. She had 26 ships, held together by loyalty and duct tape. Varnus had 20,000, organized, fueled, flawless. Celira's own advisors whispered surrender. Travis asked only one question. Does anyone still believe in you? They came quietly at first. A war captain from the Battle of Ressen, stripped of title for questioning Varnus. A scientist who refused to code minds for the Obsidian Legion. Fringe colonies who had long suffered under the Empire's shadow, but saw in Celira not power, but humanity. And all of them trusted Travis. Not because he was loud or charismatic, but because he never asked for trust. He simply stood when others fell. On Varelian Prime, where the first seeds of resistance took root, Travis didn't fight like a prince. He fought like a marine. Cyber ambushes, blackout storms, EMP nets dropped from hacked orbitals. While drones swarmed like metal locusts, his people moved in dirt and shadows, slicing between gaps the machines hadn't been programmed to see. The turning point wasn't loud. It came when a fortress thought impenetrable broadcast emergency feeds, Images of men in Terran camouflage, plasma smeared and grinning, dragging the AI core into sunlight. Varnus didn't scream on a battlefield. He screamed in his throne room, clawing at controls that refused to obey. And when Celira breached the room, scorched, cracked armor, eyes like cut glass, she didn't raise her voice. She only said, "You chose fear. I chose trust." Behind her stood Travis, burned, bloodied, unflinching. He had not come to take the throne, only to make sure she survived long enough to sit on it. The coronation chamber was nothing like the generations had seen before. Gone were the jeweled banners of conquest, the orchestral wave of war hymns echoing across titanium halls. There were no gold-forged crowns suspended by levitation fields, no cloaked generals forming a wall of honor behind the new sovereign. Instead, there was quiet, a reverent, electric quiet, like the moment before a storm breaks or history changes shape. Princess Celira, now empress by the will of neither bloodline nor tradition but survival and loyalty, stood on the obsidian dais in a robe of soft gray, unadorned, unarmored. It was woven from the fiber of a refugee ship's flag, frayed at the edges but stitched with care. She had refused the armor. She had refused the crown. What she wore instead was the weight of memory. Beside her stood Travis Cole, still and solid, as he had always been. His body bore the story others tried to deny: splintered shoulder, cauterized thigh, half-healed burns traced up his neck like war tattoos. The only thing he held was his helmet. No medals, no blade. Just the tool of a soldier who never expected to be remembered. The royal court, once bloated with contempt and ceremonial arrogance, stood in silence. Some lowered their eyes in shame. Others studied him like an anomaly too inconvenient to ignore. The jesters who had made him a punchline now remained unseen, their hollow shows pulled from syndication the moment his boots touched the palace floor again. Across the empire, media channels scrambled to rewrite the narrative. Strategic anomaly. Unexpected tactical evolution. But in the streets, in the colonies, in the mining rings and wind harvest towers where the forgotten lived, the truth had already taken root. It wasn't Varnus's drones or Celira's lineage that turned the tide. It was a man no one believed in. A Terran with no throne to defend and no legacy to prove. He fought because someone believed in him, and he refused to let her fall. When Celira stepped forward to deliver her first words as Empress, her voice didn't rise like a ruler's. It steadied like a promise. Strength isn't the absence of fear or pain. Strength is choosing to stand when the galaxy mocks you. He stood. So I stood. And together, we rose. Later, as the dignitaries dispersed and the chamber emptied, a young Varelian cadet, barely of age, eyes wide, approached Travis with trembling awe. "How did you do it?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Travis smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth cracking against dried blood. "I wasn't born strong," he said. "I just didn't quit when it hurt."